So this is what we are doing today, the anterior abdominal wall structure. So anterior abdominal wall is formed in such a way that it has to protect the delicate organs lying inside. So from the skin inside up to, it consists of 9 layers. From skin up to the peritoneum there are 9 layers. Number 1 is the skin. Number 2 is the Camper's fascia. Number 3 is the Scarpa's fascia. Number 4 is the external oblique muscle. Then internal oblique muscle. Then transverse abdominis muscle. Then comes the fascia transversalis. Then comes the extraperitoneal fat, and ultimately the peritoneum. So any bullet injury, any knife injury has to penetrate through these 9 layers, then it can injure the internal organs. So this is how beautifully and protective anterior abdominal wall is formed, and it is devoid of the deep fascia because anterior abdominal wall is a distensible area. In the uterus, in the female, in the pregnancy, it has to enlarge, so it has been deep fascia is absent. Number 2 reason for deep fascia absent is the stomach, because stomach lies in the epigastrium, and when we take the food, those stomach enlarges in size. So in order to facilitate the enlargement of the stomach, there is no deep fascia has been given over here. If there would have been deep fascia, our tummy would have been flat. Now we start with the skin. So in the anterior abdominal wall dissection, first we remove the skin of the anterior abdominal wall. When we remove the skin of the anterior abdominal wall, we encounter the second layer of the human body, that is the superficial fascia, which consists of the yellow color fat and loose areolar tissue which held this fat, and the cutaneous artery, veins, nerves and lymphatics. Now cutaneous nerves they are the intercostal nerves. The anterior branches, they reach the abdominal skin. So from the xiphi sternum is the starting point. Here start the T7, then T8, T9, T10, 11, 12. So all the intercostal nerves, they also supply the skin of the anterior abdominal wall as well as the muscles of the anterior abdominal wall with its motor branches and skin by its sensory branches or the cutaneous branches. So this yellow color fat in the superficial fascia is called the Camper's fascia in the abdomen. Camper's fascia. And when we remove this Camper's fascia, superiorly attached is continuous with the superficial fascia or the yellow color fat of the thorax. And if we trace inferiorly, this yellow color superficial fascia or Camper's fascia is continuous with the superficial fascia fat of the front of the thigh. Then when we remove this yellow color superficial fascia or the Camper's fascia from the abdomen, we encounter in the lower abdomen another type of the superficial fascia, which is the membranous layer, and the name is called the Scarpa's fascia. But this Scarpa's fascia is not present in the upper abdomen. It only starts midway, the point midway between the umbilicus and the upper border of the pubic symphysis. Then this Scarpa's fascia goes downward. In the midline, when it goes into the perineum, its name is the Cooley's fascia. While if we trace it laterally, it goes beyond the inguinal line, it enters into the front of the thigh, and along 9 centimeter below and parallel to the inguinal line, it is attached to the deep fascia of the front of thigh, that is called the fascia lata, along a line which is called the Holden's line. So because of this Holden's line, the extravasation of the urine doesn't spread over the whole of the front of the thigh, and it is only limited to the above the Holden's line. So that is the how extravasation is facilitable. When we remove this, now the question rises, why there is only the Scarpa's fascia in the lower part or the membranous layer? Why not in the upper part? This Scarpa's fascia is only present in the lower abdomen to protect the pelvic organs. As we know, immediately behind the pubic symphysis lies the urinary bladder. So when the urinary bladder increases in size, the volume increases above 300 ml. Now it becomes it's not a pelvic organ. Now it becomes the abdominal organ. And it comes above the pelvic brim, and any lower abdominal injury can rupture the bladder. So as there is no deep fascia in the anterior abdominal wall, so this Scarpa's fascia acts as the deep fascia. It is thicker than the Camper's fascia and protect the lower abdominal organ. Now in the female, behind the urinary bladder in the pelvis lies the uterus. And we know in the first trimester of the uterus comes above the pelvic brim. Now it becomes an abdominal organ. and then any lower abdominal injury may cause the abortion. As we know, the first 3 months of the pregnancy is very, very important, crucial. So any lower abdominal injury management. So this scarpa fascia protects the uterus in the first trimester. So that is the reason why the God has only created the scarpa fascia in the lower abdomen. When we remove this scarpa fascia, then we encounter the first layer of the muscle human body of the anterior abdominal wall, that is called the external oblique muscle. So external oblique muscle takes origin from the lower 8 ribs, and its muscles are directing downward, forward and medially. But beyond a line, which is an oblique line, which is called the linea semilunaris, muscle fibers, they are only confined lateral to the linea semilunaris. Beyond this, only the aponeurosis of the muscle comes. So this is the form, the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscle. And now the insertion. Now this insertion, the last fibers of the external oblique, they come from the 12th rib. So these last fibers of the external oblique muscle, they come downward and they are inserted over the outer lip of the iliac crest. So outer lip of the iliac crest, starting from the anterior superior iliac spine, it is attached to the anterior iliac spine and the outer lip of the iliac crest. So this is the insertion of the external oblique muscle. Then when we trace it medially, what we see, the aponeurosis of the lower border of the inguinal ligament is from the inguinal ligament. So lowermost aponeurotic fibers of the external oblique, they do not enter into the front of the thigh. So along the inguinal line, they are reflected back into the abdomen. And what they constitute is the reflected part of the inguinal ligament. So this is the, as they go roll back into the abdomen, so they constitute them. And when we trace it medially, the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscle is attached to the pubic tubercle medially. So medially it is attached to the pubic tubercle. So it is attached to the pubic tubercle. So laterally it is attached to the anterior superior iliac spine and medially attached to the pubic tubercle. So this part of the inguinal ligament with the reflection back into the abdomen is called the inguinal ligament. It is also called the Popper's ligament. It is about 10 centimeters long. So laterally there is a bony attachment, medially also a bony attachment. But in between there is no bony attachment of the inguinal ligament. I can put my hand below the inguinal ligament and reflected part of the inguinal ligament, and this is free. So there is no any bony attachment in between them. It is because many things they come from the abdomen and enter into the front of the thigh, and many things from the thigh it has to enter into the abdomen. So there is no any bony attachment. So this reflected part of the inguinal ligament or this convex part of the inguinal ligament, to this is attached the fascia lata, or the deep fascia of the thigh is attached to this upturned part of the inguinal ligament or convexity of this. So internally inguinal ligament is concave, but externally it is convex, and to this convex is attached the, along its entire length is attached the deep fascia of the thigh, that is called the fascia lata. So that is how we depict the what is the inguinal ligament. Now from the pubic tubercle, as it is attached medial to the pubic tubercle, so few fibers from the pubic tubercle, they go laterally, and attach to the pectineal line. And this lateral extension of the inguinal ligament fibers or aponeurotic fibers of the external oblique from the pubic tubercle, they curve laterally and get to the pectineal line. They constitute the lacunar ligament and pectineal ligament. So this is how we can show that this is the entire length of the inguinal ligament. So this is the lacunar ligament, and then This is continuous as the pectineal ligament. So this is how this inguinal ligament, and this is the pubic tubercle. From pubic tubercle, the lateral extension fibers of the internal the inguinal ligament, they go to the along the pectineal line. They constitute what is called the pectineal ligament. So inguinal ligament, lacunar ligament, and pectineal ligament, they are continuous to each other, and they are the fibers of the aponeurosis of the external oblique fibers. When we trace it superiorly, the uppermost fibers of the external oblique aponeurosis, they are attached to the tip of the xiphoid process, and right here meet with the left aponeurosis, and from all the subsequent fibers, they run obliquely from right to left side, all decussate or cross in the midline above the and below the umbilicus, and they constitute, and inferiorly when we trace downward, they are attached to the pubic symphysis in the midline, to the pubic symphysis in the midline. So they constitute what is called the linea alba. So linea alba is nothing but this is the decussating fibers of the aponeurosis of the external oblique, stretching from the tip of the xiphoid process up to the upper border of the pubic symphysis. So it is called the linea, means the line, alba means white. It is also called the white line of the abdomen because it is avascular. Any surgical incision in this line may lead to the post-incisional or post-operative hernia because its healing is very poor. So we are only giving the midline incisions of the anterior abdominal wall in the linea aspera in the emergency. So this is how we constitute this. And as we have seen that the inguinal ligament is attached to the pubic tubercle and linea aspera is attached to the pubic symphysis. So in this way what happens? No fiber is attached to the pubic crest. And because of this, no pubic crest is attached, the fibers is deficient on the pubic crest. So because of this what happens? A superficial gap in the external oblique aponeurosis is created. A triangular gap is created, is called the superficial inguinal ring, whose base is formed by the pubic crest. This stretches from the pubic symphysis to the pubic tubercle, and its apex is directed laterally upward, and on this apex there are decussating fibers at the apex which make the apex strong. Then it has got medial and lateral crust. So medial and lateral crust, they are actually the condensation or the thickening of the aponeurosis fibers. They become thickened medially and in the lateral part of the superficial inguinal ring. So they form the bundle or the crust medial and lateral. So the medial and lateral margin of the superficial inguinal ring has been made strong or stronger to prevent, because through this comes the spermatic cord in the male and the round ligament in the uterus, and both are movable structures. So in order to prevent the injury to the medial and lateral parts of the superficial inguinal ring, they have been made thicker because of the condensation of the aponeurotic fibers, because of to facilitate the movement of the spermatic cord and round ligament of the uterus. So this is how we cover it. If we see internal side of the external oblique, what we see here is the reflected part of the inguinal ligament, which stretches from the anterior superior spine up to the pubic tubercle. So this reflected part of the inguinal ligament, again when it goes upward, it is having a upper border which is free border, but it doesn't remain free, because this free reflected part of the inguinal ligament, it gives the origin of the internal oblique from the lateral 2/3 and transverse abdomen from the lateral 1/3 of this. So this reflected part of the inguinal ligament, when we see in the medial part, then we see that above the pubic crest, this reflected part of the inguinal ligament, they lie just behind the superficial inguinal ring, and they constitute the posterior wall of the inguinal canal and superficial inguinal ring, and they try to prevent the inguinal hernia. So that is the reflected part of the inguinal ligament. It also just lies, medialmost fibers, they lie just behind the superficial inguinal ring. So this is how we do the external oblique. When we remove this, internally what we see, there lies the internal.